The call came in at 6:47 in the morning. Not that Elias Beaumont checked the time right away. He was already awake, had been for an hour, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold, going over the briefing packet one more time, not because he needed to. He had read it 4 times. He just needed something to do with his hands. His daughter had called the night before, right after he finished packing. "You nervous, Dad?" "No, liar." He had laughed. She knew him too well. "A little," he admitted. "Dad, you've run 3 hospital systems. You turned around a department that was losing $40 million a year. You have a wall full of awards that you never look at." "Different kind of place," he said. "Same kind of people." He thought about that now, sitting in the dark kitchen, the briefing packet face down on the table. Ridgeline County Medical Center. 47 years old, largest public hospital in the county, deep in the red, under federal investigation for billing irregularities. Staff turnover at 31% annually. And a culture problem that nobody in the packet described directly, but that lived in every line of it, in what wasn't said, in what nobody had bothered to fix. They hadn't told the staff yet. That was the plan. Standard protocol for a turnaround appointment. The board wanted him to walk in clean, observe for a full day before the announcement, see the operation as it really was before people had time to adjust their behavior. His badge that morning would read visitor. His name would be his name, and if anyone Googled it, they'd find him. But nobody ever Googled the visitor badge. He got dressed in the dark gray slacks, a plain button-down, no tie. He left the good suit in the garment bag. He wanted to look like someone passing through, like someone who didn't matter yet. He pulled into the parking structure at 7:14 and found a spot on the 3rd level. The elevator in the structure was broken. There was a sign on it, handwritten, that said "out of order." Again, the last word added in different ink, like someone had come back later specifically to add the editorial. He took the stairs. The main lobby was already full. A woman at the information desk had her back to the room, on the phone, laughing. A man in scrubs was asleep in one of the chairs near the window. A family, mother, 2 kids, elderly man in a wheelchair, waited near the triage window, and no one was at the triage window. Elias stood and watched for 60 seconds. Nobody came to the window. The family waited. He walked to the elevator bank and pressed the button for the 4th floor. Department of Surgical Services, where he had decided to start. The elevator took 4 minutes to arrive. The doors opened on 4, and he stepped into the hallway, and a man nearly walked into him. Tall, broad, maybe 45, with the particular energy of someone who had been running this place for so long that he had stopped noticing what it looked like. The man had a paper coffee cup in one hand and a tablet in the other, and he didn't look up. "Excuse me," Elias said. The man looked up then. He looked at Elias, at the visitor badge, at the plain button-down, at the face he didn't recognize, and something shifted in his expression. Not hostility, not right away. More like the casual dismissal of someone who had sorted people into categories so many times that he did it without thinking. "You lost?" "No," Elias said. "Just observing." The man glanced at the visitor badge. "Vendor?" "No. Then you need to check in downstairs. Visitors aren't up here without an escort." Elias nodded slowly. "I'll keep that in mind." He moved to step past. The man didn't move. "I'm serious. This is a secure floor. You need to go back down and get an escort from the front desk. Who should I ask for? Whoever's there." And the man turned and walked away, already back on his tablet, already somewhere else in his head. Elias watched him go. He wrote nothing down. He didn't need to. He found a chair near the nurse's station and sat. Nobody asked him to leave again. Nobody asked him anything. He sat there for 22 minutes and watched how the floor ran. What he saw in those 22 minutes told him most of what he needed to know. A medication cart left unattended in the hallway for 11 minutes. A call light that stayed on for 9 minutes before anyone acknowledged it. 2 nurses arguing, quietly but unmistakably, about whose job it was to deal with a patient in room 4412. A doctor who walked past a spill on the floor 3 times without stopping or flagging it. And the man from the elevator, whose name Elias would learn was Hugh Garrett. Charge nurse, 12 years on the floor, the informal center of gravity of the department. Moving through all of it like he owned it, which in every way that actually mattered to the people who worked there, he did. Elias went back downstairs at 9. He walked the ER. He sat in the waiting room for 40 minutes, which was 40 minutes he would remember for a long time. Because in those 40 minutes, he watched a man in visible pain wait without being triaged, watched a child fall asleep across 2 chairs because there was nowhere else to put her, watched the TV in the corner cycle through the local morning show twice. Nobody changed the channel. Nobody asked the family with the child if they needed water. At 10:15, he went to the cafeteria. He bought a coffee and sat at a table near the window and opened the briefing packet for the 5th time, not because he was reading it, but because he needed to look like he was doing something. The man who sat down across from him, uninvited, did it the way certain men do, like the chair was always going to be his and Elias just happened to be there. His name tag said Grammendistration, Director of Operations. His name was Boyd Schiller. "You're the consultant?" Schiller said. Elias looked up. "Sorry. The board hired a consultant. Is that you?" "I'm just observing today." Schiller studied him for a moment. He was maybe 52, 53, with the look of a man who had survived a lot of leadership changes by making himself useful enough to keep, but not ambitious enough to threaten. "Observing what? How things run?" "Things run fine," Elias nodded. He looked down at the briefing packet. "We had a bad 2 years, Schiller said. COVID fallout. Staffing shortages, the usual. But we're stabilizing. The federal review is almost wrapped up. We expect a clean finding." Elias looked up at that. "Do you?" Something passed across Schiller's face. He had heard something in Elias's tone, some weight that didn't match the visitor badge. "You're not a consultant." Elias didn't answer. Schiller's eyes dropped to the badge, then came back up. "Who are you?" "Someone who's going to need a tour of the administrative wing after lunch," Elias said. He closed the packet. "I'd appreciate it if you were available." He left Schiller sitting at the table with his coffee and whatever he was starting to understand. The morning continued. He walked the 3rd floor, medical surgical, and found it better than 4 in some ways and worse in others. The nursing staff there was younger, more attentive, more obviously stretched thin. A travel nurse named Gwen, who didn't know who he was, stopped him near the supply room and said, "Are you lost? This floor's really busy today." Not rude, genuinely trying to help. He thanked her and kept walking. He stood at the end of the 3rd floor hallway for a while. Down at the far end, through a window, he could see the parking structure. 3rd level, the spot where his car was. He thought about the drive in that morning, the cold coffee, his daughter's voice on the phone. Same kind of people, she'd said. He wasn't sure if she was right. He was starting to think the people here were, most of them, trying to do something that the system around them had made almost impossible to do well. That wasn't the same as the problem being the people. The problem was never really the people. Lunch was a sandwich from a cart near the main entrance. He ate it standing up, watching the lobby. The woman at the information desk had her back to the room again. The triage window was unstaffed again. Different family waiting this time. He went to find Hugh Garrett at 1 o'clock. Garrett was in the break room on 4, coffee cup refilled, talking to 2 other nurses. The conversation stopped when Elias walked in. Garrett looked at him with the particular expression of someone trying to decide if they needed to be annoyed. "You're still here," Garrett said. "Still here." Elias pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. "I wanted to ask you a few questions, if that's all right." "About what?" "About how this floor is run. About what you need to do your job better." Garrett glanced at the 2 nurses, who had gone back to their coffee, with the practiced disinterest of people who knew better than to be in the room for something like this. "Look, I don't know what you're here for, but whatever it is, I've seen it before. Somebody comes in, takes notes, writes a report, recommends cutting staff, leaves. Nothing changes except we've got fewer people and more paperwork. Has that happened here before? 3 times in the last 6 years. Elias absorbed that. "What would you change?" If you could change one thing about how this department runs. Garrett looked at him for a long moment. Whatever he was calculating, he came out on the other side of it. Communication, he said. Nobody talks to each other. Nursing talks to nursing. Doctors talk to doctors. Administration talks to nobody. Nobody's in the same room at the same time for longer than 5 minutes. By the time information gets from one end of this floor to the other, half of it's wrong and the other half's too late. Elias nodded. What else? And something shifted. Garrett leaned forward, coffee forgotten, and he talked. He talked for 37 minutes. He talked about the medication cart system and why it didn't work. He talked about the on-call rotation and the way it burned people out in cycles. He talked about the equipment in room 408 that had been half broken for 11 months and had been reported 14 times. He knew it was 14 because he had kept a list. He had kept a list. Elias didn't write anything down during those 37 minutes either. He just listened. He asked follow-up questions. He said, I see, and walk me through that, and what happened next. And Garrett talked, and the two other nurses in the break room, pretending not to listen, were very clearly listening. At the end of it, Garrett sat back. You're going to write all that down in a report and it's going to go nowhere. No, Elias said. No, I'm not going to write a report. Garrett watched him. Then what are you going to do? Elias looked at him steadily. I'm going to fix it. The silence in the break room had a particular quality to it, like a held breath. Who are you? Garrett said. Before Elias could answer, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it. Text from the board chair. Ready when you are. 2 o'clock? He typed back. Give me 10 minutes. He put the phone down and looked at Garrett. My name is Elias Beaumont. The board appointed me as chief executive officer of this hospital 6 days ago. Today was my first day. I wanted to see this place before it knew I was coming. The room didn't move. I'm going to need you at the meeting this afternoon, Elias said. You and whoever else on this floor you think I should hear from. Garrett opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. You've been walking around here all day with a visitor badge. I have. And nobody. He stopped. Schiller didn't tell anyone. I asked him not to. I wanted the full day. Garrett looked at the table. Then he looked up. The elevator in the parking structure has been broken for 3 weeks. I know. I took the stairs. Something crossed Garrett's face that wasn't quite a smile. It was something more complicated than that, like a man recalculating something he'd already counted as lost. 4 o'clock works better for the floor, he said. If you want people who can actually talk, 4 o'clock. Shift change has more coverage. Elias stood. 4 o'clock. He was almost to the door when Garrett said, Mr. Beaumont. He turned. The woman at the information desk in the lobby. Her mother's in hospice. She's been working doubles because she needs the money. She's not usually like that. Elias held that for a moment. Then he nodded. Thank you. He went to find Boyd Schiller. He found him in the administrative wing, behind a closed office door, and when he knocked and Schiller said, come in, and saw who it was, the expression on his face was the expression of a man trying to decide how bad this was going to be. I need the full financial summary, Elias said. Not the version you show the board. The actual numbers. Those are, I'll need them in an hour. Schiller looked at his desk. He looked at the framed photo of himself shaking hands with someone at what appeared to be a golf event. He looked at Elias. How much do you already know? Enough to ask for the real numbers, Elias said, which is different from knowing everything. I'd like the chance to hear it from you directly before I'm working from documents alone. There was something in that, the offer of a door, and Schiller took it. He spent the next 34 minutes walking Elias through what the hospital actually looked like under the surface. The deferred maintenance, the contracts that didn't make sense, the billing practices that were the source of the federal review, which were not, in Schiller's telling, malicious, but were the accumulated result of a system nobody had audited in 9 years. Schiller wasn't excusing it. He seemed, more than anything, relieved to be saying it out loud to someone who was going to do something about it. Why didn't you flag this? Elias asked. I flagged it in 2021. Schiller opened a drawer and produced a printed memo. He slid it across the desk. Elias read it. The memo was clear, specific, and had been addressed to the previous CEO, who had responded by ceasing 3 board members and doing nothing. "I see," Elias said. He kept the memo. The 4 o'clock meeting happened in the largest conference room on the 4th floor, and it was not a polished meeting. It was not the kind of meeting where people came prepared with presentations. Garrett had rounded up 6 nurses, 2 charge nurses from other floors, a respiratory therapist, and a patient transport coordinator named Willis, who turned out to have more operational knowledge of the hospital than almost anyone else in the room, because he went everywhere and paid attention. Elias sat at the head of the table. He did not have slides. He had a legal pad and a pen. "I'm Elias Beaumont," he said. "I'm the new CEO. I've been here since 7:15 this morning. I've been watching, and now I want to listen. You have things that are broken. Tell me what they are." The first 10 seconds were quiet. Then Willis, from the far end of the table, said, "The pneumatic tube system on 2 has been down for 6 weeks. And then it started. They talked for 2 hours and 10 minutes. Not to each other, not at first. To Elias. Person by person. Thing by thing. The way a building tells you where the water's been getting in if you know how to look. The medication cart. The elevator. The equipment in 408. The call light system that had a known lag. The scheduling software that forced overtime in patterns nobody had officially acknowledged. The training protocols that were 12 years old and had never been updated. The patient feedback process that was, as near as anyone could tell, purely theoretical. Elias wrote all of it down. Near the end, Garrett said, "What happens now?" Because I've been in rooms like this before, and mostly what happens is we never hear about it again. "I'm going to be here tomorrow," Elias said. "Not with a visitor badge. And the day after. The department heads are meeting with me at 7 a.m. starting this week. I'm going to want someone from this floor in every one of those meetings. Why? Because the people in those meetings have been talking to each other for years and the elevator is still broken." He paused. "I want someone in the room who uses the stairs." Nobody said anything for a moment. Then the respiratory therapist, a young woman named Cass, who had not spoken once in the full 2 hours, said quietly, "Are you actually going to fix the elevator?" Elias looked at her. "I'm going to make a call tonight. I want to know first thing tomorrow what it's going to take and how long." She nodded once, like she was putting it on a list, the kind of list that was mostly there to keep track of disappointments. He understood that. He did not take it personally. After the room cleared, Garrett stayed. He stood by the window while Elias gathered his notes. Outside, the parking structure was visible from here too, from a different angle. "You really didn't tell anyone?" Garrett said. All day. Schiller was walking around here at lunch looking like he'd swallowed something." "I imagine he was." Garrett was quiet for a moment. "What you said before, about fixing it." He was looking out the window, not at Elias. "I stopped believing that was possible about 2 years ago." "I know," Elias said. "How do you know?" "Because you kept the list." Elias picked up his legal pad. "People who stop believing stop keeping lists. You had 14 entries. You remember the number." Garrett didn't say anything. "That's not cynicism," Elias said. "That's someone who still thinks it matters to have a record, even when nobody's looking at it." He left Garrett standing at the window. In the parking structure, he called his daughter from the stairwell on the 3rd level. The elevator was still broken. He didn't mind. "How was it?" she asked. "Long. Good long or bad long?" He thought about the day. The family in the lobby, waiting. The child asleep on 2 chairs. The memo Schiller had been carrying around for 4 years like an undelivered letter. The respiratory therapist putting his answer on her list of disappointments, waiting to see. "Necessary long," he said. She laughed a little. "That's a dad answer. I'm your dad." He got in the car and sat there for a moment. The briefing packet was in the back seat. He didn't look at it. He already knew what was in it. What he knew now, that he hadn't known this morning, was what wasn't in it. The parking structure was mostly empty. The city was doing what cities do in the early evening, settling into itself, traffic thinning, lights coming on in windows. Through the concrete gap on the north side of the structure, he could see the back of the hospital, the loading dock, a cluster of staff on a smoke break, a single lit window on the fourth floor that was probably the break room. He thought about what it meant to walk into a place before it knows you're coming, to see the thing before it has a chance to become the version of itself it shows you. There was something useful in that, and something heavy too, because what you see is not just the problems. You see the people inside the problems. You see Garrett with his list. You see Willis, who knows the whole building because he goes everywhere. You see Cass with her quiet voice, adding one more thing to a list she is tired of keeping. You see the woman at the information desk with her back to the room. You see a building full of people who are still, somehow, showing up. He started the car. Tomorrow he would walk in through the front door, and he would not have a visitor badge. And some things would begin to change, slowly and then faster, the way most things change when someone finally decides to stop observing and start being accountable for what they've seen. But tonight he drove home with cold coffee in the cup holder and a legal pad full of handwriting in the passenger seat. And somewhere on the fourth floor of Ridgeline County Medical Center, a charge nurse was probably still standing at the window, recalculating something he had counted as lost. The question worth sitting with, the one that doesn't have a clean answer, is what it costs a place when the people inside it stop believing anything will change, and what it costs those people when it finally does.